I guess this committee has a different style.
What's your style?
Yeah.
Why don't we try and start on time?
Oh, that.
Where's everybody? I feel lonely.
Now you can start worrying.
Oh my gosh, I hope we don't have to reconvene at 1:30.
So you know what? We do need this because Creatio isn't bound to. So that's
Sounds great. Okay, that's fine. As long as there's a good reason for it, let's do it.
Nancy, those are fine.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Did we get a package?
Yes. Yeah.
Was that motion that Juliana just gave you specific only to Wilson, or is it to?
Yeah, the other one is 7:05 because they have to move it.
She's going to have to move it.
I have it on the other one.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Can we just say for Wilson and all future housing?
This is 50 Wilson.
So we can't.
I think what I did not say is
Okay.
But our, yeah. Right, yeah. Oh, right, they want it, yeah, push up to me, yes.
so it'll just be pushed to a future meeting, but
Fine.
we'll move it back.
Yeah, or we'll get them to,
If it's a deferred reporting,
exactly.
okay.
I don't know, they're your friends.
I'm going to call him right now. Is Brad not coming in? I'm going to call him. But his name is he's over there. Good morning. Would members of the Planning and Housing Committee please report to Committee Room 1 for quorum?
Yeah, so my motion is, we'll do. We're gonna ask.
So,
What are you doing?
Well, don't worry, my comments will be very measured. I don't know that there's a procedural issue. Oh, look who's here. How are you? Hi, how are you? Come and listen to this. Are you going to target? Are you going to? I don't know that there's a procedural issue.
I didn't bring a copy for you.
it's okay.
Next time I get.
I've had mine. I've had mine.
Yeah, it's a 231 matter. Right. That's why procedural.
so I'm not sitting on my own. Okay, thank you so much.
So, let me get the staff to look into what happened. No, I know, it's a procedural issue, right? That's the problem. I mean, they may have helped her fight it, but they may not have said that they agree. So I don't know. It's the first item. Okay, thanks so much. Nice to see you.
Paper on it. So
We need one more, right?
we need 4. No, they can't do that because they have an appeal to 231. All matters. Let me. Could council not take ownership? But I know you were doing it last time. She didn't. Yeah. Were we under appeal for 231? Did she? Yeah. Okay. Let me double check in there. It's too much.
We don't need to. So we'll do about this recommendation. We got calls from TCB. I will.
The chair's not going to move the community benefit for either.
No, because we're falling back on this recommendation in the housing now report.
For either.
We're going to say this is going to cover everything. TCB.
Councilor Warden is there. Yep. Good morning, everybody. If I could have your attention so we could start the meeting. Good morning. Well, welcome to meeting 13 of the Planning and Housing Committee. Welcome to the members of the committee and welcome to members of council in attendance today. We have a couple of them joining us, so welcome. For those in the room with us, the screen at the back of the room provides real-time updates concerning where we are in the agenda and what's coming up next. You can follow the agenda and debate on your computer, tablet, or smartphone at www.toronto.ca/council. And we acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and it's now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none. Can I have a motion to confirm the minutes of the meeting on January 22nd, 2020? Councillor Wong Tam, all those in favor? That carries. Okay, let's run through the agenda. Item 13.1, Housing Now, 50 Wilson Heights Boulevard Zoning Amendment and Draft Plan of Subdivision Final Report. We have speakers on that. 3.2, Housing Now, 705 Warden Zoning Amendment and Draft Plan of Subdivision Final Report. We have speakers on that one as well. Item 13.3, Official Plan Review Transportation, Recommended Official Plan Amendment. We do have speakers on that. 13.4, Fir Grove Grassways Revitalization Initial Development Proposals. We do have speakers on that as well. Plan to create supportive housing opportunities, item 13.5, we have speakers on that. 13.6, intergovernmental action to address housing and homeless issues. Any questions on that item? Do you want, Councillor Wong Tam? Yep. Yep. Item 13.7, inclusionary zoning and affordable housing opportunities. Motion to receive. Councillor Bradford. Councillor Perks. Item 13.8, building affordable housing in City Place at Block 36. Motion to, oh, we do? I don't have it on my, oh, yes. We have speakers on that. And 13.9, 159 and 161 to 181, Moloch Avenue and 6 Lloyd Avenue, zoning bylaw amendment application, preliminary report.
Madam Chair, I'm working on a motion, so if we can just.
So we can stand, okay, we'll hold that. I'll hold that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so let's start at the top of the agenda. Oh, and I believe there is some new business to be introduced. I believe it's been circulated in advance. It is, no? Okay, so it's a request from Councillor Wong Tam. And if you could just take a quick second, it is just asking some measure, a report on measures to strengthen security and policies at vacant buildings. Motion to introduce? All those in favor, that carries. Great. And thank you. So Housing Now, 50 Wilson Heights Boulevard zoning amendment and draft plan of subdivision final report. Amir Avni is the first speaker. Amir. Yep, you can come to the front, turn on your mic, and you'll have 5 minutes, and you can keep track of it on that clock over there.
Okay. Hi, my name is Amir. I live at, excuse me, I have this powder just for the record. I live at 525 Wilson Avenue, and what I wanted to talk about was the safety of the intersection. It's very dangerous. I've seen accidents happen there. When I cross the street, there's cars coming at me from every direction. I really just use the intersection to cross the street with the subway, and I have to cross west and cross north on Tippett and then on Wilson. I've brought up this issue in a previous meeting, and was told that a traffic study will be commissioned, but I think that's not enough. I think that it's obvious to anybody that uses the intersection that it's dangerous and that we need alternatives. My concern is when I moved to the area, there was the building that I live in and the building across the street. Now there are many more under construction that will sooner and some later be occupied by many more people, and there are no additional roads for them to use. We're not just talking about cars, we're talking about people crossing the street. And without an alternative way to get in and out of the residential area, I'm afraid that a development like this might bring more danger, more people crossing the street, more cars. I think that before this is approved, and really before any other condo project in the area is approved, we have to look at alternatives to the intersection. What I would propose is not to allow right turns on red lights and to have a dedicated green light for all left turns. And that's what I have to say, and if anybody would like to respond, please do.
Thank you. Any questions of the Deputy? Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you very much for coming today and telling us about the traffic. I'm not sure there's an actual application in yet. I'm checking with the councillor. No, I understand. That could be dealt with when the app... We're not dealing with it. Anyway, I just want to let you know, are you aware you've got a number of other opportunities when the actual application is in front of a committee to really look in fine detail at all the transportation issues that you've raised today? You might not be aware that you have more chances than just here.
I'm not sure I understand what you mean by that.
Well, you've come today to tell us about the intersection. I want to thank you for that. But I'm wondering if you know that this isn't the only time that this will be discussed, and those types of details will be looked at as well at another committee. Are you aware that that's the process around this application? Maybe not.
I'm not sure.
Okay. I just want to let you know you have more chances than today to talk about that intersection.
Okay.
Formally. Thank you. That's
Could
all.
I be notified of those?
I believe so. If you put your name with the clerk, that the chair will tell you how that works. But yes, you have ample opportunity to keep going on this important issue of safety. Yeah.
Thank you, Amir. I'm going to allow Councillor Pasternak to ask some questions.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking the time to City Hall to come to City Hall. I guess as living there, that's a very, very busy intersection because there's a bus depot there, and there's, I guess, thousands of residents living to the south, including yourself. Now, traffic management is something that we've tried numerous times through that intersection. You're saying more has to be done. Yeah. So, would you be willing to meet with our office, and we can take all your suggestions down point by point?
Sure.
And then we can submit them to transportation with a timeline on implementation.
Sure.
And then I'd be happy to come to your building also and share those ideas.
Sure.
Okay, great. So I have a staff member, a couple staff members over there before you leave. If you want to just touch base with them, give them your ideas, your contact, and if it hasn't been done, we'll certainly work on it.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Amir. Next speaker, Mark Richardson.
Good morning, councillors. I'm Mark Richardson from HousingNowTO.com. I have Alexi Guerra with me, who is one of our volunteers. We're here today to talk about the Wilson Heights site. We're actually really happy with the work that's been done on this site over the last year, and we're very thankful to the staff for the work that they've done on it. You've set some goals for Housing Now, some annual targets. You want 40,000 units of new affordable housing by 2031. You want 22,000 of those to be workforce housing. You want 18,000 of them to be supportive housing. Realistically, that means that you need to be approving, by firing up the machine, about 1,500 units last year, 2,000 this year, 2,500 next year, and get yourself onto a pace to be approving about 4,000 units a year. Our public open data program with HousingNowTO.com has been around for just over a year. We have passed 36,000 visitors to our map. We're getting a lot of public feedback on it. We know that councillors and staff internally use it here at City Hall. We know that the media is using it. It just helps cast some transparency onto the processes around approving these sites. We also have the one sheet, which is available. But particularly to the Housing Now site at Wilson, it's currently an 8-acre surface parking lot next to a $3 billion subway extension that just got extended out to Vaughan. It is the embodiment of what is called in the planning world lazy land. We can tell that because the parking charges at that site right now are $5 from 5 a.m. to 2 a.m. and $2 from 3 p.m. to 2 a.m. You charge 25 cents an hour to park there next to a transit station. It's a giant site. It needs to be used for better usage. And it's not just you who are talking about doing more important things with giant surface parking lots. The folks at Yorkdale, just south of your site, are also doing that. They're taking their parking lots and they're transforming them into housing because we have a housing crisis here in the city. The original preliminary development concept for this was around 1,150 units, with 385 of them being affordable. The revised number that we saw in September was 1,464 with 488 affordable units. Our understanding is that the numbers may have even increased a little bit since then, and you're now bumping up to 1,500 units on that site. So that's really good work from the staff. But that shows you that the original targets that were set for these Housing Now sites were low. You had a 26% increase in the number of units between January and September of last year. You added 314 units. So don't use those numbers that were released in December 18 as the maximum. In many cases, they are far below what these sites can actually accommodate. So we've taken just those 4 sites that were fast-tracked last year so you can see what the change was on those sites. We've sent a letter in to you, and we're happy to answer any questions you have about our response to the Wilson site.
Thank you. Any questions? 2 more. Councillor Wong Tam.
Thank you very much. And as a councillor who represents downtown Toronto, we certainly can put a lot more density onto this particular large parcel of land. Why do you think, this is a city-initiated zoning amendment, why do you think the numbers have been so conservative, recognizing that we're in the backdrop of a housing crisis?
This one was actually a site that had a bit more promise to it because it was classed as revitalization lands. So you'd already done the Tippett Road lands, which are the south parking lot. There'd been a lot of groundwork done. I think staff were trying their best to do stuff at a pretty rapid pace after the last election, and how they decided to fast-track these sites was to make them conform to existing zoning in a lot of cases, and sometimes that existing zoning doesn't really work for the kinds of density you need to make affordable housing construction work in 2020. And Alexi can speak to that maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, so as Mark was saying, it's basically that. I think a lot of, so the official plan policy was in place and would encourage the densities that we're seeing in the recently revised application. But certain things like urban design guidelines and things like that were sort of dictating the original built form on this site, including the zoning, were to, as Mark was saying, to fast track. We were trying to conform to policy that's kind of out of date. And I think it would have been far more better to work towards using the policies that were already in the official plan and regeneration areas to push for more aggressive densities, first off, basically.
So what would your recommendation be in order for us to actually build more housing?
In a general sense, I would treat these Housing Now sites as tabula rasa, as a blank slate. I would come up with some sort of zoning definition that says we'll set a target for the affordable units and the types of affordability we want, but we're not going to apply a lot of the design guidelines and the other things that make the functionality of it really hard to build. We're going to be talking about the City Place example later on today. And that's a great example of a project from Open Doors that fell apart because it was built in City Place as like an 80-unit, 8-story building. That that density doesn't work for modern construction costs.
And so with respect to the actual number of units out of the 1,500 units that will be deeply affordable, so that of below market rent, well below market rent.
Well below market. So there are a couple of different ways for us to get there. In this example, if you look at the chart there, we've got 488 that are listed as affordable. We put the affordable buildings at the top of the tower, not because we expect them to be penthouse units, but if you cut height and density, the first thing you lose are those affordable units. That's what happened at 80 Dale, right? So those units, there's 380 or 488 in the current plan right now. I believe 10% of those are supposed to be more deeply affordable, but depending on who the affordable housing operator is that you partner with, you could also be bringing all of the new portable housing vouchers, rent subsidies to these buildings. So even if it's a one-bedroom where the operator is getting $1,100 a month, the person out of pocket may only be paying for $500 a month for that unit because the rest is being made up with, I think you guys got another 20,000 rent subsidies or something like that, or 10,000 rent subsidies last year. I can't remember the number.
And with respect to the number that will be accessible, I think that as we have an aging population, as we recognize that many of the people who most likely, if they end up in affordable housing, they're going to want to stay in affordable housing, even as they age and get older. We don't want to have to move them out and not live independently. The quantum is relatively modest, and I think the requirement right now is 10% of
I think it's 10% of total units.
10% of total units.
I think.
Yeah, and it has to be spread out through the amount of unit, the unit mix.
Do you think that number should be higher, given the demographics that we're going to be working with?
The number should probably be higher, but what are you willing to trade for it? If you look at this example here, this sort of shows that Mayan pyramid step-back design that the city planners seem to prefer here in Toronto. Every time we step back, the units become more expensive above it, and they become more space constrained. If you want more units that are wheelchair accessible, you need to have wider doorways and bigger floor plates. So rather than going up 4 stories or 3 stories and stepping back, if you let them go up 8 stories before a step back, we have a bigger floor plate to create more accessible units.
Okay.
So these things are positive, but you can't get them without trading something else away.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Just one quick question,
Yep.
Mark. Are you aware that the 40,000 units is not a target of the housing now, but of our housing plan?
Correct.
Okay.
We're aware of that, but we expect that these giant lazy land sites are going to need to carry a lot of that burden.
That you expect well.
And everything we say about these sites applies to inclusionary zoning as well.
Yeah.
If you want inclusionary zoning, you're going to have to make some of these other constraints more flexible to make the math work.
Yeah. Sounds good. Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, thanks so much for your.
Oh,
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, and I have your document here. Are you aware that there's a 55-acre vacant site just north of here that is part of the Allen District Plan? That is the Allen District Plan. And there's nothing on it except for a subway station. And I'm just wondering, I'm curious to know why you're focused on 50 Wilson Heights and you're sort of almost settling for less, and really the opportunity is up there.
I think if you read our letter, we're actually very interested in what your design review panel said, which was that if Downsview ceases to be an airport in the next couple of years, you could do more density on Wilson Heights. Of your 4 fast-track sites this year, we sent letters of support in to Wilson because we think that the density is appropriate at Wilson, given the current constraints. We supported the Vic Park site. We had concerns about Merton. We had concerns about the Warden sites. So, this 55 acres that you're talking about, hopefully in 2 or 3 weeks, we're hearing that that's going to be added as the Create TO Wave 2 for housing now. Like, you guys have to do, 50 acres a year at this kind of density to get to the targets that you've set. It is disruptive density for your neighborhood, but
Yeah.
that's like at York Dale, those kinds of disruptions
No, that's fine. I mean, I was just curious on why you would settle on this site when in fact there's a 55-acre above it. Why you put a lot of energy?
We didn't settle on this site. Your staff put it into the list of targets for fast track last year. We responded to that with the appropriate height and density to make the math work.
Well, no, I appreciate that. Certainly, what I see here is not exactly staff recommendations, but so you're not shy about taking on city staff, that's for sure.
Or city councilors.
Or city councilors. So you say here people not parking. Fair enough. Would you agree that many of the people who use parking are seniors or disabled? Many of the people using this lot are parking there to go downtown for life-saving treatments at hospitals. Would you say there's no intrinsic value?
You can have all the wheelchair parking you want at that site. I would quite happily pay somebody to sit at the entrance every day and track how many people who have those special needs. Your staff did a check on it, and I believe the number was that more than 40% of the parkers who were there were actually coming from outside the city of Toronto, right? So, like, who are we subsidizing? Who are we
Okay.
giving cheap parking to? I'm giving
Well,
parking to cheap people from Vaughan. Why are Toronto taxpayers giving cheap parking to people who don't pay Toronto property taxes? If you think there's a concern about disabled people or people going to hospital not being able to get a parking spot, I would happily put somebody on that gate who will let all the disabled...
You're not going to do that. You're not. You're saying you're going to do that. You're not going to do that.
No, we'd be happy.
And you don't
to
have
do
the
that.
authority to do that.
That's fine.
So
I believe you do, sir.
I guess the other thing is you're running a value system. Could we not run a value system on almost anything we do at the city? I mean, housing affordability is crucial. It's the #1 issue affecting the city. I can say that. And
So then why are we arguing about a parking lot?
so you could run a value system on anything we do. You could the zoo's losing $30,000 a day. You could say people, not penguins. Why aren't you running down with a banner about that?
Well, the people, not penguins, the zoo, if I recall correctly, for like 5 or 6 hours charges $12 for parking. So you can have all the parking you want if you're willing to charge people $3 or $4 an hour to park there, like the zoo does. I can't justify 24 cents an hour on 8 acres of land next to a transit station during a housing crisis. I mean, that's insanity. And you're a fiscal conservative. If you think the right thing to do is to give stuff away at 24 cents an hour so somebody can park empty car storage on lazy land, then we're making a value choice here.
Well, at $30,000 a day, the subsidy of the zoo is far greater. So I'm saying that my office, I'm not going to argue with you.
That's your last question, Councillor.
Okay, we'll leave it at that.
Okay, I'm happy
Thank
to
you.
talk to you
I think
afterwards,
so.
Councillor.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Next speaker, Alejandra Ruiz Vargas. Good morning, Alejandra.
Good morning, everybody. So my name is Alejandra Ruiz Vargas, and I'm a member of ACORN. So ACORN is a membership organization of low and moderate income people that we focus on social, economic, and justice, and our biggest issue is housing. Last Saturday, ACORN was invited to the Social Planning Toronto budget austerity in the Lyon. They organized a very nice meeting at the Lawrence Heights community. And one of the ladies there who has 2 children and pays about $1,800, $1,600 in rent, she was asking, government has been given so much money for housing, but what is the housing? So myself, I started to speak about the things that I heard, and then I realized that I was making I was what is the word I want to use? I was making an excuse for what the government has made in these 23 years of austerity. So I decided I'm not going to make more excuses, and acres cannot make more excuses because we're not anymore in a crisis housing. This is the wild, wild west in Toronto. So it's a good thing that the city is building affordable housing, but we need all levels of government to be doing this. The city, everybody knows, is becoming unaffordable, so we need the city to do more. Housing now is a major opportunity, but public land is not infinite. First, we need to get real rent control, because let's say today we made a solution for all housing and become affordable, but what we're going to do if we don't apply real rent control. And we had the opportunity now with the housing now because it's our land. So we can apply real rent control. That is because .4, so any non-affordable unit in these buildings will have no rent control. So this likely 66% of the building. The city has the power to add on all this and be a leader. For example, the city of Burnaby and BC is using covenants to require vacancy control and inclusionary zoning in all buildings that are zoned for rental. Second, we need deep affordability. We changed last year the meaning of affordable, so that means 30%. So why we're still working with 80% average market rent? So it's a loss of time when we meet here and then we agree on something, and then it's not working upon. We also need to maximize the amount of units that are affordable. The winning bid should be the one with maximum affordability. ACOR also urging to remember that there was a committed to prioritize no-profit housing providers during the bid process. Personally, I work for an organization that is a no-profit, and we had quiet units that are affordable. And yes, we have been a struggle to maintain it affordable, but we are doing it. And actually, our eviction prevention is amazing. And I don't know why we cannot be taken as a consideration as the number one and being a no-profit housing providers. So I think non-profit housing providers doing a marvelous job. So they should be the number one to be considered when they're going to do the bid for the housing out. We know that Toronto can do great things. It just needs to be a priority. The concern should not be for the needs of developers anymore. I know many people here in this round, councilors, has been expressed that you are concerned because if you increase the bid, many developers will say no. But I don't know if you noticed that we are the golden egg.
Alejandra, if you can wrap up.
Okay, thank you. No, I finished. I really appreciate it.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thanks so much. Next speaker, Marcia Stone. Good morning, Marcia.
Good morning, councillors. My name is Marcia Stone. I'm a member of ACORN from the Western Chapter. ACORN is an association of community organizations for Reform Now. We are the largest grassroots organization of low and moderate income people in Canada, and we fight for social and economic justice. We're here today to talk about affordable housing, specifically the Housing Now site at 50 Wilson Heights Boulevard. We need to make sure we are using all the public lands available for affordable housing to build affordable housing. But we need to make sure it's actually affordable. Average market rent is not affordable for low-income seniors or minimum wage earners with children. I'm a senior. Acorn is urging you, as you consider this development, to make sure the winning bid has deep affordability and as many affordable units as possible. We also want to remind you that affordable should be based on income. Average market rent goes up every year while pensions, wages, and social assistance rates stay the same. So long-term, basing the definition of affordable on market rent is now good. Acorn is going to keep pressing on this, and we'll be making sure that this definition gets changed. The other big issue we want to flag for you is rent control. When Doug Ford got rid of rent control, it has been a big blow to tenants and a big handout to developers and landlords. And it's been a big blow to the city's affordable housing programs like Housing Now. Any of these market rental units in this development will have no rent control. How is it possible to give away public land or public funds to a non-rent control building and call it affordable? Try living in one of those units. In my neighborhood in Weston, at 22 John Street, the developer got a bunch of city money to build an affordable building, and now the tenants are getting a 22% rent increase. It's ridiculous. So Acorn want to flag that because improvements should be made. However, it's a good thing to be building affordable housing. Tenants need it, like myself. Toronto needs it, but it needs to be better. I believe there's an opportunity with a lot of projects with regard to housing that you guys are working on. That is the opportunity and the time for all the stakeholders, Rent Safe, city councilors, the city staff, the city inspectors, all of that. They all have to be on board at the table. And I'd just like to make one, I was hoping that there was some land in my area in Weston where some affordable housing could be built. I see a lot of condos going up there, and I see a lot of landlords taking over property and jacking up the rent, and people are having stress and are in crisis on a daily basis. This is what people are living every day. I am hoping that you guys will take into consideration the constituents that you all serve. Every one of you have a nice warm house, clean home to go home to. There's a lot of people that don't have that opportunity. And with that, I thank you. Any questions? Councillor Perks.
Thank you, Councillor Perks.
Thank you, and thank you, Marcia. It's always good to be reminded. So there will be some, I'm told, some information coming forward about the issue of rent control. I think there's some good news here, but we don't have that in front of us today. I'm curious, though, for your thoughts on another aspect of this. So this is all public land presently, and Create TO is about to do a deal with some private developer, and the result will be that on this public land we get 488 rental units, but the developer gets 1,000 units to make profit off of. Is that your idea of the best use of public land for affordable housing?
My thoughts are, I understand that we have to have, I guess, a blend. All right, you're going to have a blend of tenants, right? You want to create a community. No, I don't agree with that at all. I am very upset that every time I go to a meeting about housing or something, a seniors building being built in our community, again, the rent is always the same thing, and the fact that these developers are getting lots of tax breaks. You know, for 25 years or more, they're getting a lot of perks. And my question is, what about the landlords?
Could you use a different word than perks, please?
No, sorry. I'm sorry. But, you know, it's, they're getting a lot of benefits. And I know I'm new to this community. However, I've been here for 4 years trying to get a place. I shouldn't have to be, kissing anybody's butt to get a place, right? I'm on a fixed income. I'm in a better position than some people because I'm living with my daughter and my grandson, right? But others don't have that. And it irritates me every single day when I talk to people and see people that are living in the crisis in the moment. It's not a crisis for over there. It's a crisis that they're actually living in today. So what do we do to help those people? And I just think these contractors, the other question, I just want to ask a question. With these developments and these affordable units that are going to be created, are they all going to be the same size apartments? Are they going to be the same quality apartments for those that are affordable and those that are non-affordable? And that's why I say that definition of affordable has got to be changed before we continue with these projects that you're planning the future of in Toronto for the next 10, 20 years. If the language doesn't change, we're going to have problems when we're trying to negotiate and talk to developers and contractors. That's just my thought.
Thank you, Marcia.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Next, Brenda Goldferries.
Good morning, Madam Chair, councillors, and other members of the public who are here. Let me preface everything I'm going to say going forward by the fact that I appreciate that there is a housing crisis. I realize affordable housing has to be built. I applaud all the work that's been done. However, in my opinion, this is not the right site. I am one of those people who lives just far enough away from the station. I work downtown, so I take the subway every day, and I park at Wilson Station. I am just far enough away that it does not work for me to take the TTC to get to the station, together with the fact that quite often I'm going home at midnight, standing on an empty bus platform for an hour waiting for a bus in the hopes that maybe it'll come. It's not safe. So for me to take the bus to the subway station does not work. And there are a great number of us who park in that station who are in the same boat. So I guess my first point is, and I think Councillor Pasternak brought it up and was kind of blown off, there is a very large empty piece of property on it is between Wilson Heights and the Allen, running between Wilson and Shepherd. I don't know what that piece of land is called, but it's not being used. The only thing I ever see on it is an ambulance occasionally, some cars, a truck sometimes with some flashing lights on it. That's it. Nothing else ever happens there, except for once about 10 years ago, the Goodyear blimp landed there. But that's it. Nothing is happening on that piece of property. When I went to one of the Housing Now meetings, we were told that, well, it's being considered for use, but it won't be able to be built on for 3 years. Okay, I understand we're in a housing crisis. I get it. But this property at 50 Wilson isn't going to be built on for at least 3 years either, so why not consider that other piece of property? And for me also, again, my issue is more the parking. The numbers that were provided with the what's going to be built there, they're, in my opinion, completely out of whack. There's 1,150 or 1,400 units being built, and from what I understand, there are going to be 400 spots available. Of those 400 spots, 244 of them are available for the rental units, and 151 of them are available as unreserved for people using the retail space, the commercial space, visitors, and those of us who park right now at Wilson Station. Those numbers were based on the fact that of those their parking units, the 244 for the rental units, those people are going to take their cars away during the day, so those units are now going to become available for those people who park at Wilson Station or want to be in that building for any other reason. You're building this building, or we're being told it's being built next to Wilson Station so that those people don't need to use their cars to get on the subway and go downtown. Therefore, those 244 rental units who are not using their cars to go downtown, their cars are sitting there, no space is available. So you're now taking those spots out of the mix. So let's be conservative. Let's say there's 200 spots available for members of the public, whether it's people who are parking at Wilson Station to go downtown to go to work, or using the commercial space, or whatever the case may be. You've got now, for me personally, at Wilson Station, we lost a 600-spot lot. We now have this lot, which I believe is 800 or 1,000 spots. That's going to disappear, so you've now gotten 1,600 spots which are gone, and you're expecting those people to park in maybe 200 spots that are available. There was talk about putting a parking lot at Shepherd West Station. I don't park there now right at present because, in my opinion, it's a dangerous situation. The parking lot is very far away from the subway station, which is fine, I can walk it. However, you're crossing a roadway that is used by all the buses coming and going to and from that bus station, as well as any of the cars that are coming and going from the drop-off spot. So you're asking people to park in a parking lot where they're in a dangerous situation. There's an empty piece of land in front of that parking lot beside the subway station. We're told that maybe there's consideration of building parking there, but then I've heard that that's also being considered surplus land and is going to be sold off for a condo. So again, no parking available, more people coming in. It's just not conducive. And I understand the folks from Housing Now said that the parking price is very low. I agree. You can raise it.
Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up.
Okay.
You're well over your 5 minutes.
I apologize. Thank you very much. Keep it reasonable. All I'm asking is there is an empty piece of property that is literally not even a half a kilometer north of that. That is huge and can be used.
Thank you.
Give consideration.
Any questions of the deputy? Seeing none, thanks for joining us here today.
Thank you.
And that is it for speakers. Any questions of staff? No. Sorry, I just want to make sure that there's nobody else in the public that would like to speak to this item.
Emily.
Oh, two more? Oh, okay. So if you could please come to the front and give your names to clerks. Okay.
Hello, my name is Sean Galbraith. I'm a planner. Nothing involved with the project, but I wanted to say that I fully support the revised design within the restrictions that have been sort of imposed on the project by the Downsview Airport, and I think there are some servicing constraints. I think staff has done a really good job working with CreateTO to maximize the amount of units that can really be achieved on the property. With regards to parking, I agree there is a large piece of land to the north that would be a great location for a surface parking lot as an interim use. And you can run an airport-style shuttle bus back and forth from the subway station to get commuters from Vaughan access to Wilson Station. And we should be building housing next to subways. We shouldn't be building parking lots. That's it.
Sean, any questions? Seeing none. I think I saw another hand up in the air. Okay, thank you.
Got it. Didn't want to ram the table over again, like I have once. So, I have a question for y'all. In this report, it doesn't say how many of those housing units are going to be wheelchair accessible, because not everyone who's disabled is poor. But the other thing is, I hear the car drivers complaining and saying, oh, they wait an hour on the bus platform. Wilson Station is actually one of the safest places to wait for a bus because it's well lit, there's emergency buttons, and not only that, not one bus that goes through there is once an hour at night. Not one. The other thing is, it must be nice to be able to use Wilson Station. Gee. If only it was accessible. If only. So why aren't we building a parking structure at Shepherd West or at other subway stations on the edges like Go Transit? Build an actual parking structure. That's 4 or 5 stories high, that has wheelchair accessibility, that has good elevators. Why don't you take a page from Go Transit, the way they've had to do it? There's one in Burlington you can study. There's one in Whitby, Ajax, I don't know if Oshawa has one yet. But here's the thing. Why don't you follow Metrolinx's idea, build a parking structure for these car drivers that see fit to drive their cars. Charge them a nominal fee and make them pay for once. Make car drivers pay for their access, for their dependence on their vehicle, for their, I'm not gonna say this nasty, but for their laziness. I'm sorry, I'm a woman with multiple disabilities. I'm legally blind. I don't use wheelchairs because it doesn't conform to my lifestyle. And I travel late at night. I travel at midnight, 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. God forbid I'm legally blind. Must be nice for people to take their cars for granted and take their abilities for granted. Why aren't we building these parking structures? We have this empty land beside the highway. Why would you put people living in that piece of land beside the highway? I use the Costco up there. You know how I have to get to the Costco? Lawrence West, to a bus, to Dufferin, up Dufferin. If I want to use Wilson Station to change buses, I've had to drive on the roadways of Wilson Station up and down the ramps, up and down the curb cuts. And by the way, garbage loading zone for the win. Accessibility, from what TTC has said. So why don't you put a parking structure there? You know? None of this report talks about accessibility of these units. The ease of access to Wilson Station. The only bus route that serves Wilson Station that goes to an accessible subway, Shepherd West, barely runs. And you take 40 minutes to get from station to station. Imagine an able-bodied person having to do that. There'd be an uproar. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none. Is there anybody else that would like to speak on this item? Seeing none. Question? Oh, Jen. Oh, sorry. You were behind the column. I didn't see you.
Sorry, I couldn't throw it up on my laptop, but how do I use the overhead? Just turn that on.
In the meantime, I'm going to remind anybody that is here to speak on any of the items in the agenda, if you can just let clerks know. If you haven't registered, you still have an opportunity to register for any item, and you can let them know and give them your name. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Oleg. I live in Ward 9, right on Keele and Wilson. I went to a city planning meeting in November, back when they outlined the Yorkdale Mall transit plan, and they had this transit survey for the area. So this shows the volume to capacity ratio of the routes in that area. So here you can see the Allen Road and 401 intersection, and the Wilson Station is right around here. So you can actually, if you look at it closer, you can see Route 96, which is the primary route that serves the commuters in that area, going from west of Keele, is red. Red means that it's at 100 volume to capacity. And then this is the PM rush hour. So I can also speak from experience that during the PM rush hour, that bus route is packed. At this point, I carpool to that Wilson parking lot to avoid those packed buses, both to and from. So I'm perfectly willing to pay whatever price that's on that lot, let it go to the city coffers. But until this transit over capacity is resolved, it's a little unreasonable for the residents in that area to continue to suffer this transit issue. And as you can see, this area, let's see, is growing. So anything in yellow and light green, and then this has the old districts, but you can see this Ward 9 area, it's growing at still the same 5%, and some this light green area is at 10%. So the transit issue is going to continue to get worse unless there's more capacity or some other plan for this. And to make matters worse, this area is also underprivileged. You can see the dark red on the west side is the low-income population of Toronto. That's my point.
Much. Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you for joining us today. Anyone else that would like to speak on this item? Okay, I think this is it. Now, questions of staff. Outside councillors? Questions of staff? Councillor Pasternak.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to staff for their hard work on the file. So we have 488 affordable units coming into 50 Wilson Heights, which is great news for our neighborhood. But who does the intake? Who does the screening? Who does the intake? Who does the testing of eligibility? When does that start, or has it started already? Because my office is getting calls.
I just remind everybody that this is a zoning application.
But usually the Affordable Housing Office sits on these meetings and can answer questions like.
Oh, yes, but I just remind you to keep that in mind, that this is a zoning application.
All right, well, if no one's here to answer that, I'll move on. Oh, there was someone here to answer it. Oh, that's great news.
Okay, so the applicant under the RFP, we're still negotiating with the applicant, and so until that concludes, we won't know who the partner is. The partner will be responsible for working with our team at the city to ensure that there is equitable access for those people who need affordable housing, and all of those arrangements will be included in the legal agreements that will be part of that conclusion of the negotiation.
So does the applicant do intake? They are the landlord and tenant and applicant reviewer? Or?
The applicant team includes other parties who will be responsible for the management and ongoing access into the housing. But until we conclude that discussion with through the RFP, we won't be able to publicly report who those partners are yet. But that information will be forthcoming.
So it won't be the city who will be running intake?
We will not be running intake, but we are involved in influencing and shaping how that access will unfold to ensure that there's equitable access for citizens in the city.
Okay. So on this site, we've got obviously market condominiums and, of course, the rental towers as well. Do we have the powers to have the rental built first and then the condos later, or that's an unlikely business model?
Through the chair, we are working with Creatio and through discussions with the proposed developer for the site, we will decide on the phasing for the delivery of the residential units. But yes, our intent is to prioritize the development of the affordable housing at the site.
That means yes, the affordable rentals can be built first, or they have to be aligned with the sale and building of the market condominiums?
Absolutely. They need to be aligned. We also need to look at the financing arrangements for the site, the equity that the developer is bringing to the project, and the portion that needs to be financed as well. So as Abby mentioned, we are still in early days in discussions with the proposed developer, and we will report back once there's an arrangement in place.
Okay, thank you. So on page 29 of the report, I think this is in response to a council motion to try and accommodate some commuter parking on site. who manages these numbers? Who is going to manage the shared parking? Any fees related to it? Who has access to it? Is it a pay and display system? Is it a monthly pass system? Is this something that the successful applicant will take on?
So through the chair, the proponent that ultimately is engaged through Great TO's procurement will be engaged in looking at all of those options that you just identified. So those are part of the business transaction that will be developed as the proposal advances through the resolution of all the business terms. And I think all of those options, including partnership with the Toronto Parking Authority and other options, likely are on the table as we sort out how those shared parking arrangements will work to maximize, really, the intent will be to maximize principles around travel demand management so that we ensure our policy goals are met.
So the 441 spaces are going to be shared by retail, renters, and commuters. Is that?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's your last question. Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors that would like to ask questions? Councillor Wong Tam.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm just curious to know, in the early discussions with the TTC, because there was a dedicated bus, I guess, parking lane for them, did the TTC ask the City of Toronto for any compensation for losing that parcel of land or shrinking that parcel of land?
I don't believe, through the chair, I don't believe there is an issue of compensation. It was more an issue around resolution of their operational requirements. As you may know from reviewing the report, we were able to come to a conclusion with the TDC that moved the roadway around a little bit so that we could ensure good performance for the TDC services, while at the same time adding in extra density for affordable housing purposes.
So they never asked the city to purchase them an additional bus if they had to sort of shrink the travel time or lengthen the travel time? There was no other
That was not,
request?
through the chair, that was not part of the discussion. This is all city land.
Fantastic, thank you. And with respect to the number of affordable units, there seems to be a discrepancy. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, and I recognize, and I want to do this because it compares the two sites side by side. In item number 2 at 705 Warden, there's 500 new residential units that are being proposed, and 250 of them will be affordable rental. That's 80% of the AMR, and then 50%, and that means, and then 50% below market. I'm just curious to know, why is it in this site there's 1,500 new units that are being proposed, and 500 of them being affordable housing, and then 33% of that being deeply affordable? Like, it seems to be the numbers are inconsistent. Is there a reason why?
Performance.
Through the chair, the program target that Council directed staff to achieve at 50 Wilson Heights was a provision of a third market owner, a third rental, and a third affordable rental on the site. Through the development of the zoning bylaw, as the process extended, staff were able to find ways to maximize the utility of the total number of units provided to increase the total number of affordable units to 500, which again is part of a third of the overall. There is an intent to provide a range of affordability, both for at about 40% of the total CMHC average market rent, up to 100% of the CMHC average market rent, through the totally affordable housing, affordable rental unit target, which does meet the target identified by Council and directed staff to achieve.
So therefore, planning staff believe you're doing a good thing.
We are implementing the target that
achieved
was directed by Council, and this does increase the affordability number beyond the target that was identified.
And for that rationale, the more units that are being constructed on the 50 Wilson site and the 705 Warden site, the numbers seem to be flipped around. So there's more density going on to 50 Wilson, but there's less affordable units requirement for build out. It just seems rather strange. Shouldn't you be trying to achieve at least comparable
Again, this was the intent of the council target on the Housing Now program to achieve this mix of affordability units and to ensure that affordability is brought forward. There is a market component that is required at 50 Wilson Heights.
I would just add that there are going to be elements where the sites are different. They're different certainly in land value and across the city, as everyone is aware. So the way the ultimate proposition plays out through reviewing the local context of planning policy and looking at, as Create TO has led the market offering, you're seeing the coming together of those two streams. We're presenting the zoning to you, and the Create TO board has been considering the business terms, and together, that's the way that we're producing these outcomes.
And with respect to the number of units that are accessible, perhaps through universal design, is there any consideration that perhaps if we're building as much affordable housing as possible, there's a very good chance, considering the rising cost of housing, that people are going to want to stay there once they're in, which means that they're probably going to age, they will get older, and if the unit is not affordable, not accessible, we're going to have to go back in and to retrofit. And is it not cheaper and more advisable to actually build universally accessible designed units up front?
Through the chair, certainly the aging in place principle is something that would be smart to incorporate as much as possible. We have included in the business terms 10% accessible, which is a CMHC standard, which exceeds the building code standard. That was in relation to securing funding, I believe. That's correct. So, we continue as a matter of course to drive that agenda higher and higher as much as we can programmatically. This project's, as you know, in flight. It's been considered by Create TO board. I think going forward, we can continue to explore any and all measures to drive those principles harder.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Seeing none, speakers? Councillor Pasternak.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. This has not been an easy road, but I wanted to thank Create TO and our planning staff, of course, Mayor Tory, for launching this, for the work and the initiative. And affordability, especially in the housing arena, is perhaps the biggest social challenge that the city is facing. I have a staff member whose sole responsibility is to answer and meet with many of the people looking for housing in our social housing properties. We meet with them, we look over their paperwork, we make sure that we ask them about the decisions they're making on the properties they're selecting, where they'd like to live, what kind of community they'd like to live in, and then we advocate for them. And at the same time, we've had numerous building applications, particularly south of this subject site, in the Tippett regeneration area, where we've negotiated very aggressively to make sure that any condominium going up in Ward 6 has embedded in it affordable ownership and affordable rental options. I was just adding up the numbers that we've negotiated last term and this term, and we're closing in on 400 units in which we negotiated as part of a Section 37 agreement to make sure the people who are living in the area have an affordable housing option, and these would be condominiums. You've heard it a few times, and certainly you've heard it over the last year. I think in a certain kind of way we're settling for less. There's a myth that I support parking over affordable housing. That is just not true. I can tell you that many people rely on the commuter parking. These are our best TTC customers. We do not want them driving downtown. We want the disabled to be able to park and get on the subway, those seeking medical treatments at downtown hospitals to be able to have a place to park, and so those are working families also to be able to park. Are we not charging enough? Well, we're probably not charging enough. But it remains an important aspect of life in the inner suburbs, where the distances between one's home and higher level transit is long and hard. So it's been my position when I found out about this site as being identified that it shouldn't be going here. We should be looking at the 55-acre vacant site with nothing on it other than a transit station. And just to the east of it is a fire station and a Buddhist temple, and then there's 2,000 condos just to the north of it. That's really where the future was and is. And we spent a year on this site when we could have been working on that. And I realize it is coming to council under the Allen District Plan in the coming months. But at the same time, I think we've compromised on the number of affordable units. We could have done better. On this site, I think we could have looked at a better park and certainly a safer road management plan. Our office continues to have concerns about the road configuration, which is meant to centralize the park within the community. This is a major bus terminal, the Wilson Station. It's not a timid station. 5 bus routes will be coming through the road configuration adjacent to the park and across the buildings. To get to the park, you would have to cross a roadway, narrow roadway, with 5 bus routes and somewhere in the vicinity of 700-800 cars coming in and out every day, including all users. I don't think this would meet the threshold at my committee where I chair parks. I don't think the park would meet the threshold, nor would I would say it meets our Vision Zero, goals as well. So there's not a lot that can be done at this point. We've handed out what we suggest from my office, moving the road back a bit so that the buses would not be coming adjacent. I'm asking my staff. So he's going to first put on what you're seeing, what staff report is now, and that is what the proposal is now. Buses, hundreds of buses entering within the community, cutting off the park from the neighborhood. Very limited pedestrian crossing to get to it, and of course, it presents risks for everybody. We are asking in the interim, before this comes to council, take a sober second look at the roadway so that the road actually comes behind the buildings and it creates better access to the park, a healthier park, and of course, it adheres and aligns with our Vision Zero goals. So at the bottom of the day, at bottom line, I guess we would ask staff to take a look at this concept, take a look at this idea, because they won't be there when the complaints start coming in, and these interior roadways in developments always create not just enormous risk for the residents, but it's going to be extremely noisy for the people who live there as well. And with that, I think I'm at my time, so I'll wrap up. And thank you once again, and we look forward to addressing perhaps the biggest social issue facing the city today.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers? Councillor Perks.
Thank you. So first of all, on the planning issues, particularly the one raised by Councillor Pasternak, I've reviewed what the staff have done here carefully, and it's great work in terms of land use planning. Frankly, I'm not concerned about the traffic impacts of a bus every minute or every 30 seconds. As all of us know, that amount of vehicle flow is tiny compared to any intersection next to any park anywhere in the city of Toronto. So I'm quite comfortable with what's proposed here. But since the chair has shown a lot of latitude in terms of what we can do, I just wanted to climb onto my hobby horse for a minute and remind everybody how terrible the Housing Now program is. It is it is an utter shame that council gave authority to make the final deal to create TO. What will happen in this deal is we will give away 2/3 of the public land here to private developers. and we will retain the 1/3 of the land that is generating the least revenue. In other words, we are taking a piece of public land, holding on to a part that won't pay for itself, and taking 2/3 of it and turning it into financial profit for a condominium developer, and that money will leave the city forever and just finance some development somewhere else to generate still more profit. It is just astonishing that beyond that, we are going to be providing generous subsidies in the form of foregone revenues and development charges and so on to pay the developer for the privilege of extracting public wealth out of our city. You know, it is just amazing to me that the City of Toronto continues to behave as the only person or corporation in the world who can't figure out how to make money off land in the City of Toronto by providing mixed housing and keeping it in public ownership. So with that, great planning. Thanks.
Councillor Wong-Tam.
Yes, thank you very much. And I do have a motion I would like to put onto the screen. Recognizing that this report is a zoning and planning report, what I'd like to do is ask the Chief Planner and the Executive Director of City Planning to work with the CEO of CREATIO to explore expanding the percentage of units at 50 Wilson Boulevard, Heights Boulevard, to actually try to exceed the 10% requirement for those units that are accessible, and to do that through the site plan process. So this does not interfere at all with what is before us. It actually just directs the Chief Planner to try and see if we can get a few more units beyond the minimum 10% requirement of Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation. And I say this largely because I think that we're going to miss the opportunity to build for it a population that's going to be aging. And I think we're going to be hearing more and more about the need to build universally accessible housing so that everyone can live there. I've got aging parents, and at this point in time, I will not be able to take any of my parents into my home because my home is not accessible. At one point in time, if I have to, we would have to do significant modifications. And at the same time, it's a lot cheaper if we actually build it into the cost of new construction and the design at the beginning stage. And statistics have shown and studies have shown is that cost is actually rather nominal, 0.008%, so well below 1%, and we can make the unit universally accessible, which means that those with disabilities, those who have mobility impairments, can live with their family members if they do not. Right now, it doesn't work that way. So I won't speak to the Housing Now report. I think that Councillor Perks probably said everything I was feeling in my heart. We are here to discuss this matter around planning, but my vote on the record, on the public record, is available, and I was not supportive of the Housing Now report simply because it was not ambitious enough. I felt that we were giving up far too much. I want to just speak very quickly around this particular piece around the TTC lands and the conversation that transpired with City Planning and CREATIO. And I just want to say how far perhaps we've come as a city to actually work together with the agencies that we own are 100% shareholders of. It has been phenomenal in the past, the resistance of TTC willing to step up and to be a city builder with an integrated approach to planning and other land use development needs. And I'll just give you an example. There used to be, I used to represent the community north of Bloor Street, so that brings us into Rosedale, Summerhill, Moore Park. We have a subway station there called Rosedale Subway Station. Many of you use it. You may have stopped in it. And it has a very long circular bus route. It's just a bus loop. And oftentimes that bus route is literally parking for TTC staff with their private passenger vehicles, or sometimes there are TTC buses that are parked there waiting to go out. And for the time that I was councillor of that community for about 8 years, and prior to my efforts, Councillor Ray before me had tried to actually shrink that bus loop and turn that land into parkland so we can expand Bud Sugarman Park. I was asked for money, like just straight out cash, to actually transfer that from TTC charged land to park charged land. I was asked to purchase a bus on behalf of the TTC so that it could be, so we could supplement the TTC so they can maintain their level of service. It was just phenomenal, the things that we were asked for as a local community, and all we want to do is actually move it to what we thought was just a civic use that was complementary to what was already there. TTC subway station and a park to the south side. We would just want to reconfigure the real estate. And we were, of course, willing to pay for the park renovations. But I can tell you that if you did not have to pay to move that line, that line of where the TTC buses were parked, and they did not ask you to pay for an additional bus, I'm going to see that as civic progress, as different agencies and departments of the City of Toronto working collaboratively to a better urban and civic outcome. So good on you for that. And then finally, I just want to with respect to Councillor Pasternak's recommendation, I think that there is probably some good thought as a local councillor trying to ensure that there's more access around road accessibility and the road safety for his community. But I actually wonder if actually it is the right course of thinking, and simply because by putting the bus route so much further away from where the population density is, it actually, to me, doesn't make sense. So the community will have to walk much further from where they live to where they would need to board and deboard the TTC bus. So that doesn't make sense to me, so I'm going to leave that at that. I'm sure he's going to take another charge of it at council, and hopefully we can have the members support this motion before them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers? No, seeing none. I will say a few words. I just hope to not disappoint anybody, but affordable housing, it's not a mushroom, like pops up out of the ground for free. So it costs money. And what the Housing Now program actually is doing is extracting the value of that land to create the affordable housing on that land. So there was a fundamental shift that happened with the City of Toronto, where a few years ago we were actually getting this land, going it out there and selling it, and getting it as a dividend, the money for the many city priorities that we had. What happened now is that Housing Now said, no, we are actually going to maintain ownership of that land, and we're going to extract the value of that land to create the affordable housing units. So that's how we're able to create the 1/3, in some cases 1/2 of affordable housing units. That's how we're building affordable housing, because there's a cost to build those units, and that comes from the partnership that the city is creating with that developer. And that is why sometimes, like our staff told us, depending on land value, the scenarios are different in different parts of the city. Depending on what we want, in some areas we want a bit more, deeper affordable housing. In other areas, we believe that getting just a 60% or 80% would be enough for that neighborhood. So all this is put into the pro forma. But what council has asked staff to do was to use this land and create the highest amount of affordable housing for the deepest affordability for the longest period of time, and with good planning fundamentals. And I think that's what we have on this site, is that planning went away and staff went away and was able to put in front of us a plan that makes sense, that is close to transit, that is going to be creating rental and affordable rental very close to transit, that we pushed to make sure that we are having as much density as it makes good planning sense, and community building and city building sense. And we took the value of that land to create the highest amount of affordable housing. So thank you, staff, for all your work, and let's hope that this will be the first, I wouldn't say 11, I would say of many more sites to come. So thank you. Okay, so seeing that, can we have a vote on Councillor Wong Tam's motion? All those in favor? That carries, and item is amended. All those in favor? Recorded vote. Yep.
The item as amended. All those in favor, Councillor Bradford, Councillor Perks, Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Bailao, Councillor Wong Tam. That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you so much. Thanks all. Item 13.2. Before we go to speakers on this time, I ask for everybody's attention. We're in item 13.2. I'm going to ask very quickly a question of staff because there is a possibility that I'll be moving a motion to send this back to staff. And I need to advise the public because it has speaking implications. So I would just like to have staff answer me if you believe that there is the opportunity to have some redesign done and to increase the density on this site.
Through the chair, I would say that it's not unusual as projects advance through design development, detailed design development especially, and in consideration of bringing the projects forward through this procurement process, that things evolve or things adjust. If it's the desire of the committee to have us look at increasing the density on the site to produce, especially to produce more affordable in the mix, we believe an initial look at that, we believe there are some opportunities to do that. We, as you know, through reading the report, evaluated the context of the site, the applicable policies in the Warden Woods secondary plan, which is a secondary plan that dates back some 15 years. So if it's the desire of the committee to adjourn the matter and have us be instructed to go back and look again, I wouldn't say that we would be looking at significant modifications, but there may be room to add some density, and we'll take a good look at that. I would caution the committee's expectations around it because there are sensitivities on the site with respect to infrastructure. These, looking back, were former industrial lands many, many years ago. The subdivision in the area got produced with new servicing, entirely new servicing, so there are sensitivities around functional servicing. It's not just a built form puzzle that needs to be resolved. We need to look carefully at that, so we would need a bit more time, and certainly we would anticipate going back and having a conversation with the community as well, because we've been working with the community through the current design. So taking all that into account, if it's the desire of the committee to adjourn the matter and have us come back, we'd be happy to do that.
So I will be moving a motion to adjourn this to June so that staff will have the opportunity to do this work and come back to us in June. The implications to the public is if you would like to speak on this item today, you will not be able to speak when it comes back in June unless there's substantial changes to the project. So you will have an opportunity. I will ask anybody if they want to speak today or if we adjourn and then you'll speak in June. Okay? So I just wanted to make everybody aware that I will be moving a motion to adjourn. So, and there's no further notice of the continuation of the statutory public meeting that will be given. So, yep. So I'm going to go through the names that I have on the list, and you just signal if you would like to wait for the next meeting or you want to speak at this one. Mark Richardson, you'll speak today? Okay.
So I'll speak today because somebody else from our organization can speak later in the year. No. Okay. Councilors, Mark Richardson from HousingNowTO.com, Alexi Gura and Nama Blonda, who are also with us today. Really talking about some of the same stuff we talked about at Wilson with regards to the Warden site, so I won't repeat these early slides. Talking about the Warden site, it is currently a 7.1 acre surface parking lot next to a subway line that we're about to spend $6 billion plus extending deeper into Scarborough. It is lazy land, and it's actually, the parking there is even cheaper than the parking at Wilson. Right? It's $4 maximum to park there for the day. NAMA's done some excellent work through her smart density organization on travel times, on what the density could and should be around that site. You're welcome to ask her some questions. This is what that parking lot looks like Friday at lunchtime in the middle of the summer. Like, we're not protecting an important piece of real estate. This is lazy, lazy land that needs to be put to a higher and better use in the middle of a housing crisis. The original preliminary development concept for 7.1 acres was 450 units. Your planning staff had 225 affordable rental units. I'll draw your attention to this tiny little TTC admin building that they're putting on apartment-zoned land. It's a 2-story TTC admin building. The TTC say that they need to have this site next to the tracks. Well, they've got a south parking lot that they could quite happily put that on. This is one of the areas we'd really like you to push back on. When we came back in the fall, it was at 466 residential units with 233 affordable, still with a 2-story TTC admin building. Alexi helped us work on an alternative proposal that we submitted to create TO last summer, 1,500 residential units on that site, 500 market ownership, 500 rental, 500 affordable rental. We included space for the TTC office building, putting it down next to the station. We also made sure that it worked with all of the constraints that we could find within the historical surveys of that site. So this is where you were, same sort of scale as we had for Wilson a little while ago. You started out at 460 units. You got up currently to 508 units. You added, a small number of units to the mix. It's changed around now. You're at 508. You were at 466 in the fall. But what are we doing just a few blocks away on Eglinton? Right? Eglinton Crosstown, not on a subway. This is the Eglinton Crosstown. Look at what's happening on those privately owned parking lots along the Golden Mile. We're putting way more density on those sites. Even look at Vic Park, which you guys approved a few months ago. That site is only 2 acres at a station. It's also in Councillor Crawford's ward, as is this one. You put 508 residential units on 2 acres there, but you're only putting the same number of units on 7 acres when we talk about this Warden site. Staff may tell you that the site isn't fully available because of constraints from the Conservation Authority. Even if we look at this, a 3-acre site, which is on a transit line, which is the Don Somerville site in Councillor Fletcher's ward, on that 3-acre site, you guys got 750 units in. So these 500-unit targets are just not acceptable on a 7-acre site next to a $6 billion subway extension. That's our time. We're happy to answer any questions you have about our concerns for Warden.
Any questions? Councillor Wong Tam.
Thank you for the presentation, and I'm going to guess that you provided all this information during the public consultation to staff.
Correct, and we submitted all of this to create TO for their June deadline last year.
And at any given time, was there perhaps a more detailed dive into conversation of what you're proposing or what you're suggesting?
The only detailed dive was around certain things like the TTC request for that admin building and their requirement that it be next to the tracks. Alexi is a planner, Nama is a planner, and an architect. We're doing this work pro bono. We're talking about the kinds of scale that are possible. I don't think anything, Alexi, you can maybe speak to it. Is there anything there that is outside of what a regular organization would ask for planning on that site?
No, so what we did to model the site, we just used the existing information that was available through the application that was done. So we used their survey, existing surveys, so we knew where the easements were and the TRCA setback and so on. And I understood there's the existing layout of the park south of the community center just there as well. Yeah. So we tried to work within the same constraints and also maxing out heights in terms of density to the one tower that was proposed by city staff on the site already. And then we looked at shadow impacts and transition to the neighborhood to the north and just making sure that the shadow impact was adequately limit to basically zero onto the neighborhoods to the north.
What we did do is pretty much ignore the Warden Woods master plan of 2005 because it was written in 2005 and isn't fit for purpose anymore. It was a time before you were going to spend $6 billion extending a subway through Scarborough. If we're going to extend the subway, the quid pro quo is going to be density on those subway station parking lots at Kennedy, at all the sites as we move along. This is just the math of how you make affordable housing work in 2020.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Mark, and I appreciate your deputation. Just a couple things on the plan that you have suggested. Did you take into consideration, we have a community center that's just north of there, very underutilized community center, primarily because people can't get to it because of parking. So part of the plan was to actually look at how do we increase parking spaces to enable people from the community to be able to utilize that. So, and I'm noticing your plan, does that include the use of the community center for extra parking and utilization of that community?
I'll let Alexi speak to that because he...
Yeah, so in terms of our plans, that I mean, because these are just preliminary massing schemes, just trying to test out built form and their impacts on the surrounding, we didn't look into too much detail as to the parking, but the idea was to have a minimal impact onto the community center's parking, and then the possibility to have on-street parking and also using the 1 level or 2 levels of underground parking that will be provided for these buildings because of their short distance walk to the community center.
With regard to your justification for the 1,500 units, you haven't really taken that into consideration. It's kind of there, but you haven't had more detail on that, because that would have that was one of the considerations when we were looking at this community center. Is it's underutilized, and why do we have a community center that's underutilized, and bringing the development in there. So I just want to make sure.
It would be a lot more utilized with 1,500 households living a 3-minute walk away.
But recognizing that when the community center was built, it's built for an entire community, not just a local. So we needed to, and that's one of the justifications. With regard, and you have a large massing in front, in the middle section, that the Housing Now has suggested for parkland. You're suggesting that we remove that parkland in an area that's very deficient of park space, believe it or not, and you would mass that with buildings. Did you look at the consideration of?
Yeah, so we took the, it's hard to, I don't know if there's
I'm going to show the video here.
So the idea was,
flies around.
So the city's plan shows the park continuing south towards where the existing bridge is for the parking lot to the station.
So there's still quite a substantial park on the north side as well to avoid shadowing.
What we did is we oriented the park to be a sort of buffer between the sort of higher density, moving up to higher densities to the south and to the neighborhoods to the north. And so it ends up being an equivalent amount of parkland or a little bit more than what would be provided.
And that's a great video that I'm watching, but I've actually been there. So if you saw that, number one, you're looking at usable parkland. So I think what the proposal at this point is to have parkland that can be programmed and be usable through our Parks Department. The land just south of there, in fact, is most of it's TRCA regulated land. It's actually sloped, and it's not even it's nice green space, but it's actually not usable with regard to providing the kind of parkland, programmable parkland a community would need. Wouldn't you agree with that?
And we're not expecting you guys to order the blueprints from us on this. We're here to tell you that there's a finite amount of this lazy land available in the city. If you're spending billions of dollars on new transit infrastructure, cheap surface parking lots need to be radically upsized.
No,
I know we're just going to argue.
I agree with you on that.
We're just going to. I think we were at your meeting on the night of the Raptors final, and you had 200 angry people in your community center. We understand the local pressures there are very difficult, and we're putting this out there as an option to help the conversations lead towards more housing.
Yeah. And on that, I agree with you, and I respect you for doing that. So I just wanted to bring out those two details.
Yep.
And
we'd be happy to meet with you and your staff at any time to dig into these details further.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Susan Langdon. Good morning, Susan.
Hi, my name's Susan Langdon. I've lived in the subdivision immediately north of the subject property, 705 Warden, for 12 years, since it was established in 2008. I'm also a member of the local advisory committee for the Golden Mile secondary plan. And I have many concerns around the proposed development, but since we're focused today on zoning, I'm going to speak to that. And with respect to zoning, I would like to see the property at 705 Warden rezoned for a supermarket, and please hold your laughs until the end. I'm particularly concerned in that we live in a food desert in this area with only one typical supermarket within the boundaries of what was formerly Ward 35 to serve the 65,000 people or 24,000 households that live there. Since the ward has been expanded, there is an additional supermarket now in the ward, but it's so south and east of where I live, it's irrelevant to my situation. I'm concerned that this particular supermarket, which is a Metro, it's not within walking distance. It's over 2.5 kilometers away, which is a struggle when you're carrying a load of groceries, and there's no direct route by TTC. It requires one transfer. I'm concerned that under a current developmental proposal for that site, there are condos that are planned to be built around this particular supermarket at 1 Eglinton Square, and that this construction may adversely impact my community's ability to access the store. I'm also concerned because there was a development proposal filed way back in 2007 to have a supermarket built down the street at 685 Warden, but that seems to have died after going to OMB. I'm also concerned that the now out-of-date, approximately 2009 Warden Woods Community Secondary Plan is being referenced as justification for the increased density at the subject site, without noting that it also called for a supermarket to be built on the property that was known as 743 Warden, which has now become yet another residential subdivision after the city lost its appeal to the OMB in 2011. Consequently, if the city had wanted more density next to the subway, I think it should have appealed to have it put there to the north, and now it should be doing a swap out and putting the supermarket, which was supposed to have been there, down on the site to the south. I'm concerned that LPAT will keep overturning any attempt at designing a space for a supermarket in favor of residential developers. There are 3 supermarkets immediately to the north of our ward on the north side of Eglinton Avenue East, Al Premium, Adonis, and Walmart, and these are proposed to be demolished and replaced with condominiums under current development proposals. And I'm concerned that the Ward 20 residents that depend on these supermarkets aren't voicing more concern right now because they're not yet aware of that impending change. And the only reason I'm aware is because of my involvement on the Golden Mile LAC. I'm concerned that under a current development application, there's another large supermarket, which is actually across the street from the Metro. It's a Nose Frills. It's intended to be demolished and replaced with another food store with condos above, but it's uncertain whether the current leasee will return. I'm concerned because there are very few areas in my ward that are zoned for commercial use. It's mostly industrial. And many of the zones that are zoned commercial don't appear to currently be large enough to house a typical supermarket. I'm concerned that any former industrial sites that might at first seem to be suitable for the supermarket might turn out to be so contaminated that the time and cost to remediate them would be prohibitive to any commercial development, especially when residential developments seem to be so much more lucrative to developers. I'm also concerned because I don't have a car and I depend on transit. I'm concerned because I'm a single parent with a disabled child who must travel with him at all times to do my grocery shopping. I'm concerned because Warden Subway Station isn't currently accessible, therefore I'm forced to take the 70 O'Connor bus, which was proclaimed by CBC News in November 2019 to be the bus in the city with the worst wait times, over to Coxwell Station, which is accessible, and yet that's 4 subway stops west with my child to run all my errands, which means that I definitely don't have the option to shop local in my neighborhood, even if I wanted to. I'm concerned that the 705 Warden application package states that the TTC was counting on using the funds from the sale of 705, okay, to make the station accessible, and what that impact will be on that critical project.
Thank you. And I believe Councillor Crawford has some questions.
Thanks, Susan, for coming, and I appreciate your time and effort in, number one, coming here and also being part of the community consultation. I think it's been a valuable part of the process. With regard to the supermarket, now those comments had come up in the public deputations or the public consultation components, and I know they're referenced in the proposal. Are you aware that, in fact, city staff and planning and that I'm aware of are continuing to look at that potential of how do we utilize and how do we have a supermarket in these plans, that is not, it's still being thought about as we move forward through the process, that is, they heard very clearly from the community that that was a need, and they're continuing to look at that. Just want to make sure you're aware of that.
I'm aware of that, but I'm also aware of some of the other things, like the site to the north. I heard the rationale for the developer deciding not to go there was that, well, first they had asked for a zoning amendment for extension of my street into what was supposed to be the proposed grocery site, and they were concerned because their market research had shown that most of the people in our neighborhood use cars to do grocery shopping, and we're just as likely, once we drive off the property, to go north to Costco at the 401. And that was part of the reason why they pulled it out, because they didn't think that people would actually shop there. And now that you're building this site, which has very limited parking, I think that any supermarket is not going to, they're going to back up for the same reason. They're going to say, we want a large parking lot, and that's not apparent here. And if they're using the same market research that shows people prefer not to travel by foot, I'm one of the few in the neighborhood that does, then you're just not going to attract them. It's been 12 years that we've been trying to attract a grocery store, and we only have one grocery store for our area. It's ridiculous at this point. Like, we're starving and you're ramming more people in, and these people aren't going to have anywhere to buy food. I don't understand the purpose of this.
And you do recognize with regard to a supermarket, I mean, first of all, there are opportunities to look at what we call micro supermarkets where they're smaller in context, they don't need the parking, they actually survive. And you see that downtown all the time where people in the local community, it's really about the local community utilizing. So that's one model that can be used instead of what.
But in my case where I have a child with a disability, I want to go in and out.
Excuse me.
I want to go one-stop shopping.
And so, but again, I just wanted to clarify that is still, we're still trying to sort that out. But also recognizing too, when you're looking at retail food, we can provide the zoning, we can provide the box that would be needed, but the reality is a supermarket, whether it's larger or smaller, have to have a business model on it would succeed. And there's a good chance, my former life before politics was in retail consulting, and we could put that in there, but the reality is it'd be dependent on a retail supermarket actually coming in. Chances are they would say, well, there's not enough density to make this work or make it viable, and that's probably why they haven't chosen. But, you know, the potential of having something smaller, micro, to impact that local community would be viable. But we don't control. We can do all the zoning, but we can't tell them to come in if they don't feel that they're going to be making money, and that's one of the other challenges we have.
I do appreciate that, but this is why I think adding even more people in who are just going to be in the same situation, if you're attracting vulnerable people, if you're not putting parking spaces so people can actually drive 3 kilometers away to where a grocery store is, and you're not making Warden Station accessible, that's a big mistake. People are just going to suffer the way I've been suffering, and you might as well spare them from that.
And just the last comment with regard, you're aware that, and it's not part of this, of course, but the whole redevelopment of Warden Station is actually coming, and that is actually, again, it's not part of this, but that'll be, when you're looking at the future of that little area, the redevelopment of Warden Station is actually a big component of that, and you will be seeing that.
It is, but I think it's sad to say the solution to the problem is that people hop on the subway and go shop elsewhere. Go to another neighborhood and find your food.
Yeah,
that's what it's saying.
And I recognize that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Seeing none, thanks, thank you. Alejandra Ruiz Vargas, are you speaking today or next time? Today? Okay.
Thank you again. Well, I come in with the same song, preaching to the choir again. The thing is that, do we need more condos in the city of Toronto? We really, I know that you are aware, and actually we have been meeting with you, meeting Acorn, have been meeting with each one of you, speaking about the issue. But I'm going to be very concise and very short. And there are some situations that arise now in the city of Toronto. I don't know if you are aware, but there are people that are renting a bed. So that means you're going for a shift at night. So you're coming back, and your bed is there with another person that is sleep at night. So this was unheard on the city of Toronto, but now it's here. And this was happening in China, and the situation here is so difficult. I understand that housing doesn't grow up from mushrooms. I think so everybody understands here that housing doesn't grow up from mushrooms, but we need to do a better deal, and this cannot change. And I want to come back to the comment of Councilor Perks, the good Perks. And about being rental and not condos, and that we need to add better to the deal, because 4,000 units and then only having 1,000 units is unheard. It's our land. We need to be the ones who call the shots, no the developers. And again, I want to say thank you to Councilor Christine Bonton and Councilor Paula Fletcher for the advocacy that you really care for this city about housing. So this is what I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Bob Murphy.
Good morning. My name is Bob Murphy. I'm a member of Acorn York Southwestern chapter. At Acorn, our communities, we're fighting for positive change. We have members across Toronto who have a massive problem around unaffordable housing. We've heard all morning about housing, affordable. Nobody's mentioned unaffordable housing. That's why I'm here today. I'm here to speak about the housing site in Scarborough as building more affordable housing, and this is a good first step. But as an individual, as an ODSP long-term recipient, I want to point out a few things and bring to your attention. First of all, 80% of average market rent is not affordable for individuals receiving Ontario disability that are working part-time jobs. I am one. My ODSP allowance is $11.69, $4.97 for shelter, $6.72 for basic needs, which means everything else excluding rent. My rent next month is going up 4.9%. My rent will be $9.25. And if you take the number's not hard to figure out, you take $9.25 out of $11.69, there's not much left. I'm working a part-time job that I should never be doing. All my doctors realize that, but I have to do it because I have to pay my rent, which is 79% of my income from Ontario Disability, excluding my small part-time job. The monthly wage of a minimum wage earner is approximately $1,900 a month. That the rent is about 50% of their income working a part-time job. Affordable should be based on rent geared to income, not skyrocketing rent. On top of that, affordable developments need to have real rent control in order to stay or remain affordable, Now with no rent control, every landlord is trying to get rid of any tenant, low-paying, long-term tenant, because they know they can jack up the rent, and they'll get it because our rental stock is, I think, below 1%. Without rent control, the numbers in the rent that is going up is that nobody will be able to afford, no low income will be able to afford the rent, because the market rent is just jumping up and jumping up and jumping up. We will never catch up. The Housing Now sites have market rental units are at risk of enormous rent increases due to Doug Ford for the people, by the way, getting rid of rent control. We need to commit a real rent control on all developments getting public funds, our land, our taxpayers' land, our community land. I hear from so many Acorn community members at our meetings about ridiculous above guideline increases. I'm a recipient of one of those also. And about landlords who want their tenants to leave so they can jack up their rent on a new tenant. This is happening today, everywhere, not just in Toronto, but in Canada. Landlords used to love long-term tenants. Now, long-term tenants, we are just simply a liability. There's no reason to keep us there. Landlords are only interested in their bottom line. They have to make money. Now, with the rental situation in Toronto, there's a lot of money to be made. So at Acorn, we are urging you to do more now. It has to be done now. We need leadership and affordable housing, not market rent. Thank you for listening. I've opened up your eyes a little bit so we can improve things in the future for everybody. And I also welcome any questions.
Thank you, Bob. Any questions? Seeing none, thanks for joining us today. Alejandro Gonzalez Rendon.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alejandro Gonzalez Rendon, and I'm a member of the Association of Community Organizations for Reform Now at the St. Jamestown neighborhood chapter. At Acorn, we work to improve communities by encouraging the public and city officials, as well as organizing communities across the city of Toronto and throughout the country towards social and economic justice. Most of our members in our organization comprise low and moderate income earners, families and workers who are renters, but also social assistants and ODSP recipients. On behalf of our members and echoing the concerns of Torontonians, we must remind that the City of Toronto is long experiencing a housing crisis. As the population of the city is growing rapidly, it's also becoming unaffordable. Lack of affordable housing and lack of affordable rent is creating struggles in residents of the city who must choose to pay between paying the food or paying the rent. These hard and social and economic conditions affects the well-being of residents in the city. We welcome the development of 705 Warden Avenue Housing and Community Project and encourage that this development should focus on ensuring affordable housing for the development of sustainable and livable communities. We also must ensure that development of accessible infrastructure for future residents, including accessibility of services of elevators at the TTC Warden South Station and the nearby community center and recreational fields that will be constructed. We should take into account that among those future residents, there will be seniors and people with disabilities that they will be using such services. Finally, we must also question the definition of affordability that is based on market average rent and instead should be based on income. And also we must take consideration that to build thriving and livable communities, there must be planning on services such as community and health services, commercial and transportation services, and to prioritize economic opportunities for those who will be residents on this community, particularly on the 705 Warden Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you so much. Emily Teigel?
Hello again. So I come here. Ooh, nice ringtone. Thank you.
It was a welcoming tune.
It was really pretty, actually. So I come here representing about 40 people who live in that community. They've asked me to be here because for them it's very hard to get here, being with Warden Station not accessible and wheel trans issues and the like. I have a question for everybody, and Kristen, you may know this better than most. There's a no-frills on Front Street East that is below, I think it's the National Post building. I don't remember which newspaper. But it is a very nice-sized no-frills. It serves a community with hundreds of people with disabilities. Jack Layton used to live in the area. And why can't we get an area in Warden where there's a grocery store that's actually affordable? I wish James was still here, because I'd say to him, James, micro supermarkets are nice, but they're not affordable. For those of us on ODSP, they're not affordable. I've been in that situation. I lived in Scarborough for a while on a route that was from Warden Station. I just ask you to think about the people in the community that live on low income. I'm actually a victim of the affordable housing strategy. I lost my assisted living apartment in the Pan Am Athletes Village. No one would give me answers. And we either had a choice of being homeless and possibly dying, yet again being put in danger. I had to take the city to the ombudsman. And I've got people in the community who are blind, legally blind, who have guide dogs, and a couple people in wheelchairs, and friends that have had to move out of that community due to inaccessibility and dependence on wheel trans. When there's a lot of snow, it's extremely hard to get around. The community center is underused, yes, but part of the reason why for that is it's not accessible. It doesn't have the programs we need. The only accessible community center in this entire city that's specifically well-built for people with disabilities is Variety Village. And up until several years ago, we didn't have bus service down there. Thank God we have the 12A. But the community is begging for affordable housing, for equality, and for a grocery store. That one lady who has a disabled son, I have friends that have a disabled son, and it is an absolute nightmare to get to the no-frills. You can't afford the foods from Dollarama or Walmart or those Metro or Donuts. They're not affordable unless it's on a really good sale. And forget about Metro being affordable. There's no soup kitchens in that area that are wheelchair accessible and usable, that run on a daily basis. They're all centered downtown. And I just want every one of you, when we do developments, I've seen developments come through with zero visibility. And what I mean by that is people with disabilities can't go visit their friends and relatives. And Kristen spoke about it, about her house. So she knows what it's like. So let's put at least visitability in each of these projects. But let's also think about those of us on ODSP. The young man who's on ODSP and works part-time, I can tell from my own experience, ODSP takes 40% of whatever you make. You can make $200 a month, then they take dollar for dollar. Oh yeah, they give you $100 a month. That doesn't even cover your TTC. They give you $500 per year if you apply for it, and it's hard to get. So no matter what, we need to think about the community. That community needs help. The aging infrastructure of TCHC in that community is bad enough. the active discrimination of not making new projects accessible. And I'm going to say that. I've been to adjustment hearings. I've been to TPAT, or whatever they call it now. And so many of these developers don't give a hoot about accessibility. We have Section 37 funds. Where are they truly going?
Emily, I'm going to ask you to start wrapping up, okay?
Yes, ma'am. I just want to ask for one thing. Think of those who don't have access to food. Think of those who are aging in place and who have disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any questions? Seeing none? Thank you. So that concludes our speakers for today. So I will be placing my adjournment motion. I don't know if anybody wants to say anything. Councillor Crawford? Oh.
So I think we were confused. The speakers for today thought were just those items. So there's other things, is that correct? Yeah, there are other items.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Just this address.
This for this item. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I just want to say up front that I have been very supportive of the Housing Now initiative when I first heard about it just after the election from Mayor Tory, and supported that all the way through. I've had 2 out of the 11 sites, and in fact, pretty much the first 2 in my ward, and like any other development, they have their ups and downs as you go through the process. And I recognize that it is a process. Changes do occur as we're going through this planning process. But one of the things that also as we go through a process is you begin at the beginning of this process of an understanding where it's going to be, but you work towards where you think it's going to be ending up, where a community has certain expectations that as we get to the final process, you get to see what it's going to be looking like. And I think we had numerous consultations, or I had numerous along with consultations along with city staff on the community. And a lot of that had to do with just the explanation of what the program was all about, what the definition of affordable housing was all about. And I think through those conversations, the community, there was more of and it was an educational component of understanding what it was about. And I think a recognition, number one, that we it's a priority, we need to put in more affordable housing. And a recognition that it's not just there at this particular site or over Victoria Park, this is citywide. But we got to this understanding, I think generally, there were some people who weren't supportive, I get that, but I think generally the community was, well, we recognize and we expect that there's going to be something happening here. The challenge, of course, is now here we are from the community's perspective. We've stopped. We're sort of in a holding pattern for, I don't know, a couple of months or longer, and then we're coming back looking at, and we don't know if it's a new plan, where the community that I represent had these expectations of this is kind of where it's going to be going, and now we're not too sure what's going to be next. And again, that is a concern to me as I represent the community. But I'm supportive of the motion. I recognize that we need to look at this and the potential of bringing up a little bit more density or some more density. But there's unanswered questions in the community, and there will be, and I'll probably be getting emails and phone calls from them, which is fine. We'll deal with that. But I just wanted to put that on the record that I am supportive. We'll have to go back to the community, and hopefully it won't be complete different change. It may be just increasing density to make this site more viable. But on that, I just want to thank the chair for moving the motion, recognizing that it's a process, and we'll have to see what happens next. Thank you.
No, I'm sorry. That it doesn't work like that. I'm sorry, sir. Sir, I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm sorry. So I will be placing the adjournment motion, and it actually so adjourns the public meeting under the Planning Act and the Zoning Bylaw Amendment until June 11th. It requests the Chief Planner and Executive Director to review potential revisions to the development concept with the objective of providing additional housing opportunities, to consult with the ward councillor and local community with respect to the above, and request the Chief Planner and Executive Director, City Planning, to report on the community consultation outcomes on proposed revisions to the development concept and any changes to the draft zoning bylaw amendment. Okay, so can I have a vote on that? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you so much. Okay, item number 3, official plan review, transportation, recommended official plan amendment. First, okay, so I do have to make an announcement on this item. The Planning and Housing Committee is holding a statutory special meeting in accordance with Section 26 of the Planning, and for item Planning and Housing 13.3, official plan review, transportation, recommended official plan amendment. Okay, speaker on this item, Raymond Chen. Raymond?
7 million TTC passengers to the...
Raymond, is your microphone on? Is your microphone on? Can you check? There you go.
Hello? Hello? Check? Sound check?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
I'll start over. Good morning. I'd like to start with the question, what's it take to get Toronto's 1.7 million TTC passengers to their destinations? I'm a private citizen from Scarborough. I've spent the past year trying to improve Map 4 of the official plan. I consider my time spent my legacy to improve public transit for Toronto. I don't know if I'll be around for the next time the OP will be up for review. I'm here to ask you for the following. Direct the Chief Planner and Executive Director, City Planning, the General Manager of Transportation Services, in collaboration with the Chief Customer Officer, Strategy, Planning, Innovation, and Customer Service, Toronto Transit Commission, to develop an organization and supporting processes to issue a master transit plan for Toronto. Currently, the city does not have a structure nor staff for strategic public transit design. This is from the OP. It is Map 4, the High Order Transit Network. On page 7 of the proposed revisions to the OP, in addition to Section 3 reads, the city will work with its partners to improve and expand High Order Transit Network by B, undertaking comprehensive planning processes for new High Order Transit services in the corridors identified on Map 4. Okay. This is the current plan being referenced, AKA a master transit plan. Why are plans important? Here's a poster currently on display in every subway car. What's it take to get Toronto's 9,500 streets moving after it snows? One clear plan. Councillors do not micromanage snow routes nor select which new snow plows to buy. The city has a plan, one clear plan. What's it take to get Toronto's 1.7 million TTC passengers to their destinations? A master transit plan. This one. I was concerned for my fellow citizens, so I sent this plan to the mayor and council. The mayor replied 3 days later, "Thank you for taking the time to write to the office of the mayor and sharing your thoughts. Your feedback is greatly appreciated and will be forwarded to staff in our office for review." One councillor's office undertook the following. They sent my plan to a transit expert. Upon his review, they submitted my plan to the TTC using a privileged councillor channel. Thank you for your email. It was very detailed, so I sent it to TTC staff. They have assigned a reference number. See the title. Okay, I don't know where I put my... The future always comes. The Yonge subway is overcrowded to Finch, and the Bloor-Danforth subway is crowded. A master transit plan would head us for a better future and address our current problems. No, but I have... So, I don't know where it is. So, okay, here it is. I ask you to direct the Chief Planner and Executive Director, City Planning, the General Manager of Transportation Services in collaboration with the Chief Officer, Strategy, Planning, Innovation, and Customer Service, TTC, to develop an organization and supporting processes to issue a master transit plan for Toronto. Currently, the city does not have a structure nor staff for strategic transit public transit design. City Council is trying to get Torontonians back on their feet by failing to define a master transit plan. I have a couple of seconds left. I've noticed that public housing is a very important issue. It's number one. I'm here for number two, public transit. And I don't think council is giving enough time to address problem number two. I kind of feel left out on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Any questions? Seeing none, I'm sorry, questions of councillors. Next speaker, Christian Schwartz. Good morning, and go ahead.
Should I just start?
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks for having us here today. My name's Kristen. I work at CultureLink Settlement and Community Services, and for 30 years our organization has assisted newcomers with establishing themselves in Toronto. We've served 25,000 people in the last year, including children, youth, seniors, and so on. And among our innovative programs is the Bike to School project, and it's on behalf of that I'm here today to speak in support of some of the new language that is in front of you to be part of the official plan. I'm also a parent of a grade 7 student who travels to school by bike and by transit every day. So we'd like to speak in support of the amendments proposed in section 2.4, bringing the city together, a progressive agenda of transportation change, and specifically the new sidebar text regarding active and sustainable school travel, or ASST. To quote from the proposed new text, ASST programs aim to increase the proportion of youth walking, biking, wheeling, and taking transit. It focuses on creating safer environments for school-age travelers of all abilities and fostering healthier and more sustainable transportation habits from an early age. We're very pleased to see this new sidebar text. It's the first time that school travel is going to be part of the city's official plan, to my knowledge. School travel accounts for a large proportion of driving trips, especially in the morning, and contributes to congestion and air pollution. And reducing the driving trips and converting them to active travel in particular will help Toronto to meet goals related to environmental sustainability and health at the same time. Also, students who travel actively arrive to school more alert and ready to learn, and they have more fun, and it fosters independence. And in general, a city that allows children to travel actively is going to be a healthier and happier city. So just a little bit of historical information. Data from the Transportation Tomorrow survey analyzed by Metrolinx and their school travel trends reports show that in Toronto, the proportion of children walking to school continues to fall from almost 60% in 1986 to about 40% today, and 25% of secondary school students. But there is some good news in the recent reports, and that is that the proportion of children being driven to school is about leveling off after 3 decades of increases. And there's more kids traveling by TTC, probably because of the free transit of age 12 and under. And more high school students are biking to school than ever before. That reflects the overall increase in cycling in the city of Toronto. So, we just want to applaud the city staff for working together to bring this forward. There's now a committee at the city for the first time, chaired by public health, involving staff from planning and from transportation services, and both school boards and NGOs that is working together to foster active and sustainable school travel. What we would hope, I guess, is that you take note of this and look for opportunities to put that into action and in policy, and that we hope that next time that there are amendments being considered, that this will make it into a policy section and move from the sidebar to the policy. So that's really our comments for today.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thanks, Christine. Thank you. Sam Perry?
He's unable to be here today.
Okay, no problem. Christine Mercado?
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Christian Mercado, and I'm the elected chair of the Long Branch Neighborhood Association. So just so we are all clear on where Long Branch is, it's located in southwest Etobicoke along the shores of Lake Ontario and in between two parks, with Mississauga and Etobicoke Creek as our western boundary, which includes a GO station, the CN Rail to our north, and the Avenue Lakeshore West running through it with streetcar service. So we're here today to say that, to speak to OPA 456, and to say that our current transit is not perfect by any means, but following extensive public consultation and studies by both Metrolinx and the city, there's now a plan in place through a combination of enhancements to the GO train and enhancements to surface transit with new streetcars, including very recent reconstructed streetcar tracks that were refurbished for the new streetcars. We're therefore here to respectfully ask the members of this committee to amend the proposal that's before you to remove higher order transit west of Park Lawn along Lakeshore Boulevard West through Etobicoke on map 4 for the following reasons. So just so this is Long Branch right here, okay, and this is how the transit corridor is right now. So there's no designation to it. However, there is surface area transit that goes along Lakeshore for higher priority. So what we would like to amend is this area that's circled here in the red. So you've got this blue line that goes along Lakeshore. So by definition, the provincial growth plan higher order transit is transit that generally operates in partially or completely dedicated right ways of traffic outside of mixed traffic, and therefore can achieve levels of speed and reliability greater than mixed traffic transit. So higher order transit can include heavy rail, such as subway or intercity rail, light rail, and buses in a dedicated right-of-way. So LRTs or higher order transit has been studied by the city for Lakeshore multiple times over the years, and it's always failed. There's been no studies or analysis to support designating Lakeshore west of Park Lawn as higher order transit. There is substantial new development ongoing and more growth planned in Long Branch according to the city's current growth plan along the avenue, for example, Lakeshore Boulevard, and then the site area specific plans that are north of Lakeshore. So by designating Lakeshore as a planned higher order transit corridor, based in the policies of the new May 2019 provincial growth plan, this change will grow to encompass all of Long Branch as a designated growth area, so not just along the avenues anymore. This is premature as there has been no consultation and no studies or plans to support where that new growth should go. Long Branch is already under intensive development pressure outside of where the city has identified areas for growth, mainly from investors from outside of Toronto. This has dramatically driven up the cost of our housing and is removing previously more affordable housing to replace it with much more expensive and much less affordable housing that's out of reach of many in Toronto. Now, we've been told by city staff that there's no plans and no budget for the foreseeable future to create higher order transit along Lakeshore. There are no studies that have shown that it's economically or physically feasible. So what's the urgency in putting something that's unbudgeted, not feasible, and with no consultation in this plan? There was consultation for this plan amendment, and the feedback was that this would not work and was not desired. So why is it here? So if we look at the Greater Golden Horseshoe, so this is what the province has designated, and I've just zoomed in to show here's where Long Branch is, and there's the higher order transit corridor that's been identified. So we fail to see the urgency of this change. So on this map, it shows where higher order transit should be. So it's by no means scale, and it's also got a disclaimer at the bottom where the province doesn't take any responsibility for municipal boundaries or decisions. This directs higher order transit along Lake Ontario. It does not delineate it strictly to Lakeshore through Long Branch. Queensway has not been identified in this amendment as an option on map 4, and it may very well be a better candidate according to the city's own studies to date. The GO is higher order transit already, so in making Lakeshore higher order right beside is duplication.
going to have to ask you to wrap up.
Yep. So we're under extreme development pressure that's eroding our neighborhood character, quality of life, and removing our tree canopy. And at a time, we're addressing and surpassing provincial growth targets through planned development along the avenue and site-specific plans that direct growth. So to designate Lakeshore Boulevard as a higher order transit corridor that's not likely feasible, premature, and will direct even more unplanned growth in our neighborhood and ultimately result in no better transit for Long Branch residents. So as you look at the letters, there are many letters actually from adjoining BIAs as well as residents association that don't support this change.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thanks for joining us today. Ron Jameson?
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning.
Councillors. I just want to expand on a couple of points that Christine raised. And it has a lot to do with the feasibility. And there are some physical constraints to doing an LRT or some kind of high-order transit along Lakeshore. And that has to do with the right-of-way. And through a good deal of Mimico and New Toronto, the right-of-way is only 26 meters. What the TTC feels is necessary is about 36 or 37 meters. And you see that there's only a couple of portions on this particular drawing that show 36 meters as a right-of-way. And that's part of that's in Long Branch, and part of that is where the LRT is expected to go and serve the eastern portion of Mimico. So I thought a picture might help crystallize this. So I actually have a series of photographs of what Lakeshore looks like. And this is basically at the boundary between Mimico and New Toronto. And what you see here are basically 4 lanes for vehicular traffic. 2 of them are shared by the transit with the automobiles. We have 2 bike lanes here, and there's no parking here. When we get into areas where we have businesses, we have a similar scenario. But in this particular photo, which is Lakeshore and Superior, we don't see bike lanes. We do have on-street parking, but this is an area where the transit corridor is only 26 meters wide. So where are we going to put platforms for a dedicated transit line and have parking and have vehicular traffic and have bike lanes? In New Toronto, it looks like this. Feels even tighter. We do have parking. There is no bike lane here. The only bike access is through the Lakeshore Trail, and that comes up at first and then continues on Lakeshore. And if we were to continue further west, basically what you see is 4 lanes of vehicular traffic. You've got parking, no bike lane, sidewalk, and then you have buildings. So our feeling is that if the city wants to expand higher order transit along the Lakeshore corridor, it probably is going to mean expropriation of property. It's probably going to mean taking out some of these buildings or sidewalks, or something's got to give in order to have the space for the higher order transit line. We also had a concern about the public consultation process that took place for this. So this is the public notice that was delivered, and these are the sites that actually, the media that were used. A very passive kind of consultation process. For some reason, the city chose to use the Star as the only newspaper. The Globe and Mail, which is what I read, I don't get the Star. So basically, I was ignored. Basically, you've ignored half the citizens of Toronto by choosing the Star and not going for both major newspapers. There were a number, quite a few organizations were invited for public consultation, but the Long Branch Business Improvement Association was not among those, nor was the Long Branch Neighborhood Association among those invited. So we feel that amending this or deferring this for more consultation is what we'd like to see.
Thanks, Ron. Any questions? Seeing none. Thanks for coming in today. Hamish Wilson, next speaker. Oh, there he is. Hadn't seen him.
Yes, good morning. I was lurking. It was a very full crowd here, which is great. It helps to have a prop. These are snowdrops. I normally associate them as spring flowers. These guys, unfortunately, or fortunately, they're blooming, and they've been blooming in a yard on Brunswick from mid-January or so. This is not okay. This is actually really bad because we are in a climate emergency, and this is very relevant to this item in that transport has been leading our greenhouse gas emissions for a longer time. And we are not doing nearly enough about it all. So because of this climate emergency, and what do we do in emergency? We call fire departments, we stop what we're doing, we really have a great pause and adjust what we're doing. We don't continue on nearly as much as how we've been proceeding. So I think with the provincial changes still swirling about, I put in a set of motions in the written submission yesterday. You probably haven't had a chance to read them. With all the provincial changes to our transit and cities still swirling about, that this process of mending this official plan's transportation segment be paused and reset, and that this be communicated to other levels of government. And it's key to say other levels of government, not only the province, because the federal level has also declared a climate emergency. And there is no doubt that it is an emergency now because we're at 416 parts per million CO2 now, which may not seem like a lot, but that's just been reached. That is a new depth, unfortunately, and this is bad news, bad news, bad news. An old article, it's time to start counting emissions like calories. We are not including concrete in our assessment of transit projects. That's a really grave omission. Our EAs have to adjust ourselves. Our thinking has to adjust. So please ask the federal level when you're another motion to include concrete in any assessment of higher order transit projects. This is another situation here too. We are subsidizing the car. This is the status quo. This is a couple of decades old, $2,700 per car per year. That's a huge amount of money. That's what we're up against. Here's an amended cartoon to show the conditions on road to some degree and on subway and on transit. They want more for the crowded transit? Really? Fare hikes? Less service? The cyclists? I hope I live, potholes everywhere. It's a horrible situation, especially in the core. And meanwhile, the spacious carcoon, oh, those fare evaders. They don't want to, and I get that the cars are very helpful sometimes, but it's such an unequal situation that we're in now that we have to have transport equity first and foremost. And one of the ways is to, hey, let's lower the speed limits to something that actually doesn't kill so often. So in terms of pausing, going and amending map 4, what good are official plans sometimes? Here's a page from an official plan of Metro, 1994, I guess. You see that highlighted there, point. They were proposing doing public transit in the Don Valley, meeting up with GO. GO was supposed to do an EA to actually have the connection up in Eglinton area. As you know, I've been pushing surface transit as surface relief and emergency triage as a proper response to the climate crises. Pause it because we have to adjust our plans to think about surface transit. So another motion, please, that all work on the Ontario line be paused until there's thorough and open exploration of largely surface transit options in the Don Valley, including this Bayview to Thorncliffe Eglinton transit line in the Metro official plan of 1994, and until GO has completed the EA for connection to this line as noted in footnote 2, and that this desire for pause be communicated to other levels of government, such assessment to include the presumed flooding mitigation now underway for $3 billion. We're spending $3 billion to adjust the flooding in the Don Valley. Why don't we try and leverage the actual expenditure to make sure that we can actually think of transit in the Don Valley? There's a solution to our young line. Can we not find a bit of room there? There's an unused spur line. The other thing is, like the Scarborough subway waste of billions. There's the Gatineau Hydro Corridor. Amend Map 4 to include putting in the Gatineau Hydro Corridor as a possible solution for transit woes in Scarborough. We could do a surface relief, a set of projects for just a few billion, I think, that actually begins to have that network relief function, and it's really, really frustrating. And again,
Thank you, Hamish.
do facts matter?
Thank
No,
you
they
so
don't
much
seem
for
to.
joining us today. Any questions?
Yeah.
Seeing none?
Seeing none, as per usual. It's pretty darn frustrating. Climate crises. Didn't even get to
Thanks for joining
chat
us
about
today.
bikes.
Martin
You
Gerwin?
have climate liability, climate criminality.
Martin Gerwin? Martin, thanks for joining us today.
You've seen this before. It's map 4. Thank you. My name's Martin Gerwin. I'm here on behalf of the Mimico Lakeshore Community Network. And like two of the speakers before me, I'd like to concentrate on a very small part of map number 4, namely the stretch of Lakeshore Boulevard between Legion Road and Long Branch. In attachment 1, this is designated on this map as a higher order transit corridor, but in previous studies and in previous input from the public, this has been very much opposed. The waterfront transit study, the most professional and thorough study of the whole question, recommended enhanced streetcar infrastructure along this stretch of Lakeshore Boulevard, but not a higher order transit, not something that would require a wider right-of-way and all of the nice bells and whistles that you see in a Spadina Avenue style higher order transit. Now, there was some community consultation about this. On the 2nd of May, the city held a meeting at Etobicoke City Civic Centre, and 6 people showed up. To their credit, some of those 6 people voiced concerns over this proposed higher order transit along Lakeshore Boulevard. I quote from the report, which is in attachment 6 to the report on page 10 and on page 56. Participants challenged the higher order transit line running through New Toronto and Mimico. It was noted there have been 2 previous project-specific consultations on this particular line, and they did not feel there was justification for showing it as a higher order transit. Participants also suggested that map 4 needs more clarity. It certainly does, and for this reason, I would join the voice of our organization to those voices that have been raised before, asking that this particular feature of the amendments to the Transportation Master Plan be deleted at this time because it's very premature. There has been no report or no feedback from the city to show why the feedback from the community was ignored, why the higher order transit corridor was left in place for Lakeshore Boulevard West, when the people who turned out on behalf of the community, all 6 of them, although there were only 6 in the group, focused on this as something that would be a problem and called it premature. The waterfront transit reset set the time horizon at 2041 and concluded that nothing more than enhanced streetcar infrastructure was needed or could be accommodated anytime before 2041. So why does this still included in the 2020 revision of the official plan transportation policies? The wise thing is obviously to delete it now and have a proper examination and consultation of why this is desirable. Someone might say that it does no harm to put it on the map to indicate what longer-term plans might turn out to be. But that isn't so. Our organization has taken part in 2 long dragged-out appeals before the Ontario Municipal Board, now known as the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal. And in that context, we've experienced how the words of the official plan and maps in the official plan are words of power. It's a powerful weapon to be able to point to the city's official plan and say, well, look, this is supposed to be a higher order transit corridor for the long run. Therefore, more intensification is justified now. It wouldn't necessarily be mentioned that nothing was proposed before 2041 in the documents that led up to the formation of the official plan.
Martin, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up.
5 minutes. So what we're apt to get, if this goes ahead, is intensification without the higher order transit. The higher order transit isn't coming till 2040 anyway. Okay. So please let's delete this from the current proposal and postpone this for a future revision of the official plan transportation policy.
Thank you, Martin. Any questions? Seeing none, thanks for joining us today. Michael Cohn? No, Michael's not here. Okay. Anyone else that wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, questions of staff? Oh, sorry, one person? Last speaker on this item.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Rhoda Potter, and I represent Agincourt Village Community Association. Contrary to what I'm hearing this morning, we are in the midst in Ward 42 of intensification along Shepherd Avenue. We also deal with Agincourt GO Station, which is being expanded, and the Stouffville Corridor, which is being expanded. Yet we have nothing. We have public transportation that is not efficient to connect to that GO Station at Agincourt, which takes us to Union Station in 20 minutes. We are happy to see the extra housing that is going to be in place very shortly along Shepherd Avenue between Victoria Park and Glen Watford Avenue, both sides, and especially at Kennedy and the 401 area, Kennedy and Shepherd. The second largest development at Agincourt Mall, yet we do not have higher order transportation. So we endorse the fact that in this document, you have adjusted our area to be higher order transportation. We desperately need it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any questions? Seeing, for the speaker?
No, I have a question.
Oh, could you come back? Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
Councillor Fletcher.
I understand that there was a new density approved with the Transit City Plan, which was the LRT that was to run on Shepherd. That was a spur to approving density. Are you aware of that?
That's correct, and it was our former mayor who canceled that project, which would be in place at this moment had it gone forward.
So that would have been in place on Shepherd to address the density.
It would have.
And I think you're looking for something that will move quickly. Is that correct?
We're looking for something. We will work with whoever comes up with a plan and the budget to support that plan. Our community will support that, whatever that happens to be.
So I'm just going to ask you, on your matrix, the two things that your community wants are basically what can be achieved in the shortest possible time, and what can be achieved that's affordable, that can deliver that immediately. Is that what you're asking for? Or
We're not necessarily looking at the short term. We know that this is going to take time. But what we're looking for, right now, there is a line drawn on the map to connect Don Mills Station to the McCowan Station. I got it. Which we desperately need. There's no budget to support that, yet we do have, we're a drive-through community. Communities drive through from the 905 area from east and north.
Thank you.
And what we need is that transportation.
Are you interested in that happening as quickly as possible, or you're willing to wait 20 years?
We're hoping it'll happen before that.
I'm kind of asking, are you willing to wait 20
You're
years?
asking me whether I want a subway or an LRT.
I'm asking you if you care if you have a fast, quick LRT that could deliver this probably quicker, or you want to get in line for a subway we still don't have anything happening, even though we approved the Scarborough subway in 2013. So you said, I'm interested, if you're speaking for the community, are they totally wed, or do you want transit that will move people quickly and move?
We're looking for the budget to provide us the public transit. That's what we're looking for.
If there's a budget that provides an LRT, you would support that?
I'm not going to speak on behalf of the whole community.
Well, let me ask you personally.
I'm not going to answer that question. Thank you.
You're not answering whether or not you'd take a speedy LRT that could be delivered in a few years. If the subway was to take 20 years, you'd rather wait. I'm just asking you personally.
We actually need the subway.
So you'd rather wait?
Yes.
For 20 years?
But you need to show us the budget.
I'm sorry, the budget will be dealt with once the decision is made, if there's money. But I'm asking you, you're coming here telling us that you personally, because I know you can't speak for your whole community.
If you're asking me personally, yes, we need the subway.
And you don't mind waiting up to 20 years?
We need the subway.
I'm taking your answer. And if you're speaking on behalf of the community, would they say we want something that will move people quickly?
That I'm not prepared to do.
You're not prepared. So you're not representing the community. You're representing yourself.
For that particular question that you're asking me, I will answer that personally. But I am here to say that the community needs better public transportation. And I'm complimenting
I hear you. I hear you say you're here on behalf of your community. So I'm being clear with you. On behalf of your community, are you able to say whatever you can deliver the fastest and moves the most number of people, we want that tomorrow? Or are you only able, you can't say that because it conflicts with your personal opinion?
I can't say that.
Because it conflicts with your personal. So I want to be clear, you're representing your views here as to how to do that. You'd like it, but your views are one way, and we don't know what the rest of the people think.
I'm here to compliment you on what you've done to put higher order public transit on ships.
Which includes LRTs, subways, streetcars.
That's correct.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We only have a few minutes left, and I know that we want to release some items, so I'm going to leave questions of staff and the rest of the remaining of the item for after lunch. I do want to acknowledge, because a little bird just whispered in my ear, that today is Councillor Nunziata's birthday, and she spent the morning with us. So, Councillor
Whispered it in your ear.
Oh, that's for me to know and you to find out. So I would, no. We, if the committee agrees, I would like to release 6 Lloyd, if there's no questions or, that's the last item. That was the reason why Councillor, there's speakers on it. Okay, so, so if the committee is okay with it,
No, but you have a motion.
I do have a couple of motions. I'm just wondering if the committee would be okay with us doing it as a quick release, or if there's any questions. Is it okay? Okay, so I'll show you my motions. So there's two motions. One is with regards to affordable housing on the site, that I'm asking that we look at other opportunities. And the other one is a request from the local councillor. Okay, so can we move it as a package? Yes. All those in favor? Just for your birthday.
The staff drafted up the motion.
Gordon. So all those in favor? That carries. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you back here at 1:30. Thank you.
Yes.